Coal has quietly killed far more people than nuclear power. Shocking images of explosions and glowing ruins make nuclear seem like the scariest thing on Earth, but when you add up mining deaths, long-term lung disease, and the tiny invisible particles in coal smoke, the toll is much higher, and it happens every single year. Think about it. Miners trapped underground, kids coughing through smoggy winters, neighbors getting heart attacks from dirty air. Those are real, everyday tragedies. Radiation is scary because we can't see it, but it's basically invisible energy that can hurt cells. Even so, the worst nuclear disasters cause far fewer immediate deaths than the steady, hidden harm from coal. Coal is the boring villain that keeps coming back. First, we'll show you clear numbers, simple comparisons, and real-life examples so you can finally tell the difference between dramatic risk and deadly routine. Stay with me. By the end, you'll know which energy actually costs more lives, and you might lose a little sleep over how we choose power. Safety statistics. Nuclear energy is among the safest power sources in the world, causing only 0.03 deaths per terawatt-hour, while coal-related deaths are hundreds of times higher. Nuclear power causes about 0.3 deaths for every terawatt-hour of electricity produced, a number that is tiny on the scale of global energy. A terawatt-hour is just a big chunk of electricity, the kind produced by large power plants over weeks or months, so that 0.3 figure shows how rare fatal harm is when measured per unit of energy. In plain terms, producing a lot of clean, steady power by nuclear plants translates into very few deaths linked to the power generation itself. Coal, by contrast, registers deaths at a rate hundreds of times higher. Multiple studies estimate coal-related deaths measured the same way to be on the order of tens of deaths per terawatt-hour, roughly around the mid-20s in many analyses. Those deaths don't come from a single dramatic accident. They come from steady, everyday impacts, tiny particles and gases in the air that aggravate heart and lung disease, miners killed in collapses or equipment failures, and communities exposed to contaminated water from ash ponds. Think of coal as a slow, invisible tax on public health that shows up in emergency rooms and funerals rather than headlines. Put into life terms, one power source gives you a handful of deaths per massive block of electricity, while the other hands you dozens for the same amount. That's the difference between a quiet, rarely noticed risk and one that adds up visibly across cities with hazy skies and higher hospital visits. For families, the result is concrete. More asthma attacks in children, more missed work, and more pressure on local clinics. It's not abstract. It's the cough that lingers after a bad smog day and the grief when a miner's shift doesn't end. This comparison matters for choices about what fuels we use. Choosing energy sources with lower deaths per unit of electricity is a practical way to protect public health without needing dramatic technological miracles. And while no energy source is risk-free, the numbers make a clear, simple point. On a per unit of energy basis, nuclear is one of the safest options, and coal remains one of the deadlier ones. A little ironic humor. If energy sources were roommates, nuclear would be the neat, quiet one who does the dishes, and coal would be the messy roommate who keeps sprinkling health problems on the floor. The silent killer. Coal has the highest mortality rates because of air pollution and fine particulate matter, which cause millions of deaths from lung and heart diseases every year. Air from burning coal carries tiny bits and gases that together account for several million premature deaths worldwide every year. You can see the thicker smog on bad days, but what really does the damage is invisible. Microscopic particles and acidic gases that sneak past the nose and throat and settle deep inside the body. Health organizations point to lung disease, heart attacks, and strokes as the main causes of these early deaths, because long-term breathing of polluted air wears down organs and raises the chance of sudden, serious events. It's not dramatic in the movies. There's no single explosion, but the steady toll is massive and quiet. These tiny bits are often called fine particulate matter. Think of them as dust so small that a single one would be far thinner than a human hair. Because of their size, they can travel deep into the lungs, and some can even cross into the bloodstream. Once there, they act like an annoying guest who won't leave. They spark inflammation, make blood vessels stiffer, and can trigger clots. That's why a long-term exposure picture often looks like more heart attacks and strokes, plus chronic breathing problems and a higher risk of lung cancer. Practical examples from everyday life make this clearer. A child playing soccer downwind of a coal-fired power plant may cough more and miss school because of asthma flare-ups. An elderly neighbor who has had high blood pressure could be pushed toward a heart attack after years of swallowing that polluted air. And households that burn coal for heating or cooking expose their families directly, sometimes with very visible soot on curtains and far less visible damage to health. Communities near coal mines and plants frequently report more hospital visits for breathing and heart troubles. It's also why people in big cities with coal-driven electricity often notice that a brisk walk on a poor air quality day leaves them winded in a way that feels different from mere tiredness. The cruelty of coal's effect is in how routine it becomes. The pollution stacks up day after day, and the health damage accumulates quietly until it's severe. Small particles don't shout. They nudge and wear down, and that slow pressure translates into the large number of premature deaths experts observe. A few simple responses, reducing coal use, improving filters and cleaner fuels for homes, can cut this toll, but until those changes happen, many people will keep paying with their health. And yes, it's enough to make you grumble at coal the same way you grumble when the neighbor mows the lawn at 7 a.m. Only this time the grumble is because it really is dangerous. The radiation paradox. Because of radioactive fly ash, coal-burning power plants often release more radiation into the environment than modern nuclear plants do during their normal operation. Coal, like many rocks and soils, contains tiny amounts of uranium and thorium. When coal is burned to make electricity, most of the organic stuff disappears as gas, but the mineral bits do not. They concentrate in the leftover ash. This leftover powder, called fly ash, is full of the same trace radioactive elements that were hiding quietly in the coal. It's simple chemistry. Burning removes mass that isn't mineral, so what's left becomes a stronger mixture of whatever was in the original coal. Fly ash is very light and fine, and it likes to travel if not carefully caught. Power plants use filters and electrostatic precipitators to trap much of it, but some particles escape up the smokestack and settle on nearby fields, roads, and rooftops. Other ash is collected and stored in ponds or piles that can leak or be disturbed. Think of it like dust from a cookie jar. Wipe the counter and the sugar spreads. Leave a pile and the wind will finish the job. In some places, fly ash has even been mixed into building materials or used as fill, which is practical until you remember those tiny radioactive bits went with it. Modern nuclear power stations, by contrast, are built to contain their radioactivity. They keep most of it locked inside metal fuel rods, thick concrete, and layered barriers, and they constantly monitor emissions. Routine releases into the air and water are usually extremely small because the design goal is to prevent anything hazardous from wandering off. The material that does get produced by nuclear plants is handled as special waste and stored deliberately, rather than being spread around in ash. So while the word radiation makes people picture glowing clouds, the everyday reality is that a well-run nuclear plant rarely sprays measurable radioactivity into the neighborhood. That mismatch between expectation and reality is what people mean by the radiation paradox. A smoky, dirty coal stack can quietly scatter more radioactive dust than a controlled nuclear site that hums along with alarms and monitors. It's not an argument that coal is safe overall. Coal brings many other pollutants, but it does flip the common fear of nuclear radiation on its head in one specific way. Practical steps follow easily. Keep ash lined and covered, test soils near ash storage, and avoid casually using industrial ash in places where children play. A little common sense and good engineering go a long way. And no, radioactivity won't come wrapped in a dramatic cape. Usually it's the fine particles you don't see that matter most. The short version, nuclear accidents are terrifying to imagine, but they're rare and, when measured against the same amount of energy produced, far fewer people die from nuclear power than from coal. Coal kills quietly and constantly through breathing polluted air, mining accidents, and the extra heat and storms of climate change. while nuclear's harm tends to be dramatic and rare, like a car crash that gets all the news. Think of it this way. Coal is the roommate who coughs every morning and slowly ruins your lungs. Nuclear is the scary movie you watched once that makes you jump, but doesn't actually live in your house. Daily life examples make this clear. Living downwind of a coal plant can feel like you're always breathing city smog, while living near a well-run nuclear plant is much more like living near a big, carefully watched factory. First, know the fear of radiation is real. It's easy to imagine glowing monsters, but the real-world risks are more about tiny doses and strict safety rules. Meanwhile, coal's harms are visible. Dust on cars, sick neighbors, busted lungs, and frequent accidents in mines. That's why, in simple human terms, coal has caused far more harm overall. If this made you rethink what's dangerous and what just looks scary, you're not alone. Drop a comment with your questions or a story. Did a coal plant ever affect your town? Hit subscribe if you want more videos that cut through the headlines and show the real trade-offs. Next up, we'll compare coal and nuclear to renewables. How many lives could wind and solar save? And what problems do they bring? Subscribe, tap the bell, and first we'll see you in the next one. Sleep safer knowing the numbers. Then go nudge your local leaders to choose clean, smart energy.